Welcome to The Painful Purpose, a platform where we discuss the different philosophies of mental discipline and engage with some of the most exceptional minds to uncover the paths and principles taken in their pursuit to mental mastery. My name is Daniel Zamora. Today we're going to be talking about mind games. I like to think about this idea being the art of tricking your mind to allow your body to do more than what your mind thinks it's capable of. In other words, you're essentially negotiating with yourself to be able to push past that initial instinct of wanting to stop with whatever it is that you're doing. So I call it mind games because that's essentially what you're doing. You're playing a game with your mind and you're trying to figure out ways to almost act ignorant to yourself that allows you to do more activity or stay in that moment just a little bit longer. And there's a few direct benefits that you experience when you actually are in that moment and you're pushing yourself through that. The first direct benefit is that you're killing time, right? So when you're in that moment and you're trying to negotiate with yourself or essentially play these games with your mind and discuss, how much further do I have to do? How much more can I take? You're actually killing time because you're still doing that activity, right? So if you're in the sauna or the steam room or you're on the bike, you're on a long run, or you're studying, whatever it may be, something that is requiring a lot of mental fortitude, and you're at that limit where you think, I've had enough. You are essentially, by going through this routine of talking to yourself and negotiating these mind games, the first benefit, like I said, you're killing time. So you're discussing with yourself, you're trying to say, okay, I want to break this up. I have 20 more minutes in the sauna. I feel like I can't do any more. Let me try to break it up. Let's try to just do 3 more minutes. And while you're discussing through this whole argument that's going on within your head, while in reality, you're just sitting there in complete silence, you're actually killing time. The second benefit that directly impacts this whole scenario that you're in is that you're actually completing the task while you're trying to talk yourself out of the task. Again, I'll use the sauna as a great example because I think it's such an easy way to get into this environment, at least mentally, because it gets really intense after a short period of time. All it takes is 20, 30 minutes. While you're talking yourself through this, again, I think the art of breaking things up is really important when you're in these situations. So instead of a 20-minute sauna session where you're trying to get out at that period of time, so you're 20 minutes in, you have another 20 minutes left, you're like, I don't know if I can do this. Let me start by breaking things up. So let me try to see if I can do 2 more minutes. Let me see if I can do 3 more minutes. And then you get to that point and you're like, okay, let me do it again. And then let me get another extra piece. So same thing on the bike or when you're running. It's like, let me try to get 1 3-mile loop, right? I have an 18-mile run today. Let me just try to do 1. Let me just try to do another. Let me try to do another. I think this idea was really stemmed through a cycling friend of mine where on the bike, it's tricky because you're constantly moving and you really benefit from continuous momentum. But with cycling, if you're going 20 miles per hour, that means you're doing 1 mile every 3 minutes. So in 3 minutes, you've crossed 1 mile off the board, right? So let's say you're doing a 60, 80 mile ride. 40 miles of that are at a threshold effort. So you're really trying hard and you're on your way back. You're at the tail end of the workout. You've been riding for 3 hours and you're kind of in this mindset where you're like, dude, I don't want to keep doing this. Like I'm exhausted. Let me just do 1 more mile. 3 minutes passes. Okay, 1 more mile. 3 more minutes pass. 1 more mile. And so on and so forth. And before you know it, you are 15 extra miles in, another 45 minutes. Again, proving to the point that when you're negotiating with yourself, you're killing time, you're actually performing the task, the obstacle at hand. And then the third one is that you're educating yourself and you're learning that you actually are capable of pushing yourself past that boundary. So if you don't have a lot of experience in these situations, if you're not constantly in that scenario where you're pushing yourself past what you think is possible, my recommendation, and I've already iterated this a few moments ago, is putting yourself into a uncomfortable situation. I think that the steam room is the best way to get started with this because all you have to do, the only obstacle is gain access to a steam room or a sauna, which they're pretty readily available. And before you know it, you'll be in that room and you'll hit that limit. You'll hit that moment where your mind's like, I'm done. That's when it begins, right? That's when the true challenge begins, where you're able to start playing these mind games, negotiating with yourself to be able to push past that initial boundary and see how much further you can go. So again, 1, you're killing time while you're negotiating. 2, you're accomplishing the task at hand by negotiating yourself and killing time. Because again, all these things have a start and finish. So eventually you'll be done. That's another thing that I don't think people realize in the moment. I definitely think about it a lot, especially with my running training right now. Since I'm outside of the marathon training period at this point in time, I'm focusing a lot on speed. So speed work for shorter distance efforts, it's a lot less time consuming, but it's also a lot more intense. So what I mean by that, instead of doing an interval session that requires a 4-mile rep, a 2-mile rep, a 2,000 meter rep, and then a 1-mile rep, I will do 10 sets of 400 meters or a quarter mile, right? So it's a lot shorter, but you're going a lot faster. So the intensity often is much more difficult, which in my opinion is harder, because I'm used to being in those long-term situations where it's a 3-hour race or a 5-hour race, and you have time to negotiate with yourself. The other thing that I want to talk about is when you're in these moments where you want to quit, right? So I'll use a run, for example. If I'm challenged with a 22-mile run today, right? And I'm 12 miles in, okay? So we're about 2 hours into the run, an hour and 45 minutes, and I'm starting to feel like shit. Again, there's another opportunity to quit, right? I could just stop, go back to my car, say, hey, you know what? Wasn't feeling it today. However, you have the option again to negotiate with yourself and say, okay, let me see how much further I can go. So again, going through this process of killing time, negotiating with yourself, and dividing up the task into smaller pieces so that before you know it, you're actually almost done. And the other thing is that when you reach that point, earlier I was talking about cycling, 1 more mile, right? 1 more mile, 1 more mile. Just not thinking about the whole task at hand, just that one section. By the time you've reached the end point, the feeling that you had 10 minutes ago is more than likely gone. And then you actually feel better. And then you get a wave of confidence and motivation to be able to push through that actual feeling of, I'm not going to be able to finish this workout today. And again, these mind games can be applied to all sorts of aspects in your life, right? I again have stressed the idea that my lens is coming through the perspective of triathlon and running and the gym and, the sauna. Those are all experiences that I've had where I've hit these moments. The most profound one to me is the steam room in the sauna, because at least the first few times I went into that room for 10, 15, 20 minutes, not really expecting that to happen. And then before I know it, I'm like, holy shit, I'm having to battle with myself right now. Like, I thought I was going to be able to sit here for 30 minutes. I'm at 20 minutes and I'm already ready to go. So that's where you can really find an unexpected opportunity. And this can happen in any opportunity, right? In any given moment, I should say. It can happen when you're studying for an exam, if you're studying for a license, whatever it may be. You do have that opportunity to push yourself just a little bit further so that you can surprise yourself and get through the task and cross all the things off the list all in one, and you're done before you know it. The other thing with the mind games and understanding how much you can do once you learn more about what you're capable of and how much further you can really push your body is that it is scalable. When you're first able to push yourself 5 minutes one day, and then 5 minutes the next day, and then 5 minutes the next day, within a few weeks, you'll be able to push yourself 10 minutes, and then 15 minutes, and then 20 minutes, right? I also think the same for fasting. Something that I got into this year is starting to fast. So my typical routine is, if it's not a longer run in the morning, I'm able to wake up, do the run, go to work, just drink coffee, which I don't consider a break of the fast, and not eat until 2 o'clock, right? My window of eating is 2 to 8 p.m. typically. So it's typically an 18-hour fast. And there's moments in the day, typically around 10:30, 11 a.m., it's a short window where you might start to feel hungry. When you have that urge, when I'm talking about scalability, it's like I'm starting to feel this feeling where I'm like, I'm ready to give. I'm ready to start eating something, right? Although I have a goal set that says otherwise. So let me just try to do an extra half hour. Let me try to do an extra 45 minutes. Let me try to do an extra 60 minutes. Soon to the point where, A, your body adapts to the type of routine that it's in, so it becomes easier. And B, you know that you're capable of achieving that day-to-day routine. So you really stop negotiating with yourself because it's already predetermined, right? So for me, I used to break that fast around noon, and then that became 12:30, and then that became 1:30. And then before you know it, it's 2 o'clock. And some days it's 2:30, right? It doesn't really matter. The idea is that you slowly begin to negotiate with yourself and break through the barriers that you think that you've set already. And then before you know it, you've achieved it. So that's that idea of being able to implement mind games within your diet, within your exercise, within your studies, all those types of things. The other idea that I was discussing earlier is the idea of breaking things up, right? So if I have a 60-mile bike ride, 30 miles of which are hard interval workout, or you're running or you're studying, whatever it is, right? You have to really take a big feat. Like another example I can use is 75 hard, right? That's 75 days. It's 2.5 months. And when I look at that at its grand presence, right? It's 2.5 months. That's a long time. But why don't, instead of taking the whole challenge as what it is, let me just break it up into one day, right? So today, this is what I need to do. Once I complete those tasks for today, then the day's over. Tomorrow, let me focus on what I have to do. When I look into the marathon workout, for example, a long run would be a 5-mile warm-up followed by 3 or 4 sets of 3 miles. So let's say 4 sets, for example, with a 1-mile recovery. So 4 sets of 3 miles, that's 12 miles, plus the 5-mile warm-up, plus the 3 miles that are in between each set. That's 20 miles, right? And then a cool down if I want to do a 1 or 2 mile cool down. So 22 miles. When I'm looking at it on my schedule, I said, holy shit, I have to run 22 miles today. But instead of looking at it like that, let me break it up. So let me look at the 5-mile warm-up, okay? So I got to run 5 miles. And then, okay, let me just hit this first set. So 3 miles. 3 miles goes by, 24 minutes. Okay, now I get to recover. So that's 1. And let me do the second set, right? Okay, wow, I'm already 2 out of 4 done, right? Not even thinking about the cool down. Then I finished my third. Okay, only 1 left. Then I finished the last one. Before you know it, you're done. And then you're cooling down. I think this is a really important skill to build because you can tackle anything with this type of mindset by breaking things up, whether it's at work, right? You have a huge project you're working on. I have to do X, Y, Z. This is going to take me 30 hours to do. Let me just start by starting this first piece. For like in my scope, I work with Excel a lot. Let me just build the framework of the actual spreadsheet first. Okay, well now I'm done, and let me format the data. Okay, if data's formatted, okay, so I'm finished with this. Now I actually see the pathway of what I have to do, and I'm feeling pretty good. I'm not tired right now. Let me just get to the next piece, and let me get to the next piece. Let me get to the next piece, and then before you know it, you're actually finished with the whole assignment, the whole project, and then you feel that moment of gratitude because you realized I'm actually able to push myself further than what I think I'm capable of in a short period of time. And I got the project done. So now I can do whatever I want. I also think that you can apply these types of mindsets into a bigger picture, into a greater scale, right? When I talk about that, I'm referring to a duration of time. So like when I talk about 75 hard, a 2.5 month commitment, breaking that up into smaller sections so that it feels easier to accomplish, right? Because instead of having to do all these things in 2.5 months, which is such a long time, I don't know what's going to happen in that period of time. Let me just focus on today. Let me focus on the 5 tasks I have to do. And then once that's over, I'll wake up tomorrow and I'll focus on the 5 tasks that I have to do, right? So for example, right now I decided a few weeks ago that I was going to dedicate the next 100 days. So at the time there was 112 days left in the year. I said, okay, 112 days left in the year. I'm going to take the next 100 days, I want to do 100 pull-ups, 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, and 100 mountain climbers every day for the next 100 days, right? So 10,000 reps of each exercise in 100 days, broken up into 100 reps each day. So that at a scale, if I told you, hey, for the next 100 days, you need to do 10,000 reps of all of these things, that would sound pretty intense, right? Not something that you think you'd be able to do given the magnitude of the obstacle, right, of the challenge. But if I'm able to break things up and partition it into a format that's more digestible, it's a lot easier to achieve, right? So the first few days really sucked. I was sore everywhere. It took a long time because my body was just extremely sore. But after a certain period of time, and I think 100 hours is the actual threshold where you really start to feel better about what you're doing, and that's about 4 days. Day 1, your body's fresh, you're not sore. Day 2, day 3, day 4 suck the worst. It's always going to be the worst. Like anything in life, the start is always the worst, right? You always have the opportunity to quit because you're not used to it. That's when you're feeling the worst. You're the most uncomfortable. You're not specialized with what you're actually doing. That's always going to be the worst time to get shit accomplished. And then after that period of time, you start to gain a routine. You start to gain momentum. You start to see results, right? I've already started to notice, physical changes and mental changes, and it actually starts becoming easier as you go along. So now we're 21 days in as of September 30th, and the workout is starting to become very routine, where I know I can get it done in 30 minutes. I just have to put everything away, focus on it, come with intention to complete the workout start to finish, and then I can move on with my day. The challenge is accomplished, and then I can focus on whatever else is left for my day. And then once all of those things are completed, then I can use the rest of my day to do whatever I want. If I want to do nothing, then I'll do nothing, right? Again, using this type of mindset, these mind games, to break up big ideas into small ideas. So I look at, with this routine that I've been in lately, I've been doing doubles, right? Because I'm still working on my running, which I dedicate the mornings to, and then I do the gym activity in the afternoon. So I almost live 2 days every single day, because I wake up, I go straight to practice, I run my speed intervals, or I'm just conditioning, and then I go to work, and then I come home for work, and then I get into my second part of my day, right? So the first half of the day is waking up in the morning, getting through my cardio activity, going to work, eating lunch, getting home, boom, there's day two. And when I say day two is that the mindset that I get into when I get home, it feels like a new day. I don't feel like my run this morning was in the same period of time. It feels like it was so long ago. I'm like, okay, well, now I just have to do this for 30 minutes. I've already done that piece already today. And that's something that I think you gain over time, is that as you continue to do the same thing over and over again, you can really start to split things up. So I've heard other people talk about the idea of living multiple days within one day. And I agree. I think especially if you have more than one job or more than one responsibility, you wear multiple hats in your life and for the life of others. If you're a parent, you live the life of being a manager at work, and then you go home and then you're the mother or the father, right? So you can live multiple days, and that's another way that you can partition those responsibilities, especially when it starts to become overwhelming. The final piece of this episode that I want to discuss is an example in my own life of how I've implemented these mind games, and it's something that I like to call the dessert concept. So the dessert concept is something that I've created in my mind based off my experiences. And again, it's another iteration of being able to break up a large task into smaller pieces. So what the hell am I talking about when I'm saying the dessert concept, right? I'm not talking about, food. I'm talking about the idea of setting a whole meal and breaking it up into pieces, right? So you have your appetizer, you have your entree, and then you have your dessert, right? So when this first concept came to me on one of my long runs, okay? So it was a 20-mile run, and the first 5 miles were downhill, okay? So that's the appetizer, okay? So you're kind of easing into it, you're warming up, you're getting used to what the situation that you're in. And then the following 10 miles are the entree, right? Straight uphill, that's going to be an hour and a half of all uphill running. That's the steak, right? That's the entree. That's really where you're getting into it. And then the final 5 miles are downhill, and that's dessert, okay? So the dessert concept is another form, again, of breaking things up into a digestible format, especially when you understand that, I'm looking down at my watch, I'm 8 miles in, still have 12 miles left, right? Still have hour 45 of running left, most of which is uphill. However, once I hit that mile 15, I know my workout's done, basically, because I'm going downhill, and that's dessert. That's the easy part, right? That's the part that's going to be easier than what I'm going through right now. So instead of looking at it like I'm at mile 8, I have to get to mile 20, I'm actually at mile 8 and I need to get to mile 15, right? So let me look at 8 to 15. I've actually only been in this moment for 3 miles because the first 5 were downhill. 3, I'm going uphill. That means I have another 7 left. That's 7, okay? So let me break up 7 into 2 3.5 mile, segments, or into 7 1 mile segments. And then before you know it, you're at mile 15 and you're like, okay, this is dessert. And again, this is all about negotiating with yourself and creating these mind games so that you're able to push through these activities and these moments where you're not motivated and you're not feeling like you can finish a workout or whatever it is that you're doing, right? Again, we're using fitness as a prime example because it's through my lens and it's the easiest way for me to explain these types of ideas. So the dessert concept is something that I love because if you're able to find an opportunity to, again, almost be ignorant with yourself and trick yourself into believing an idea, it will almost always work. And then you can use it again and again and again. Especially with my experience in the marathon, it's a 26-mile run, right? The first 15 miles are super easy, right? You're kind of just floating. So the dessert's almost in the back, and you're eating dessert first, and then you're really getting into the entree at the end, because the marathon really gets hard the last 10K, 7K for me specifically. That's where things really started to get real. And that's where you really begin to grind. And then when you're in that moment, you can look back at all of the things that you've been doing, preparing you for that moment, and realize like, hey, I've been here before. I know how to do this. This is just 4.5 miles left until I'm done. That's all I have to focus on. Not the fact that I've ran 22 miles already. Let me focus on the 4 miles that's left. And before you know it, you're 3 miles. And then you're 2 miles. And you're like, let me look at my watch. Okay, 1 more mile. Okay, 4 more minutes, 3 more minutes, 2 more minutes, 1 minute, and then you're done. That's the dessert concept. It's a really beneficial ideology that's served me many times, as well as friends that I typically do these workouts with. I am preaching these random things, and it works. And that's the beautiful thing about it, is you're able to implement these things, and then before you know it, you're actually seeing the benefits of just playing these mind games with yourself and tricking yourself to be able to push past those mental discouragements that you're implementing on yourself, or your mind is putting on you, involuntarily or involuntarily. So to summarize everything that we've discussed today pertaining to mind games, once again, it's the art of being able to push your mind past what it thinks it's capable of, and allowing your body to also do the same, right? So I'm wanting to stop at this point. Well, let me just try to see if I can go a little bit further. And again, maybe my methods aren't applicable into your life if you practice them, but you have to at least try a few times to see if it could work, and try to develop your own methods, right? Because you understand what you're capable of and what limits that you have set for yourself, right? That's the thing, is when you're negotiating with yourself, you're negotiating with the person who knows what to say to you, knows how to get you out of those things that you don't want to do, right? So that's the most difficult part, because you're talking to someone who knows everything about you, right? They know your weaknesses. You're looking at that food, you're like, damn, that is my favorite food. Well, if you just have one piece, it's not going to hurt you. You know, they say all the right things. And again, by doing so, you're accomplishing, direct benefits at that moment by killing time, by carving through that actual obstacle that you're trying to get through, and then also teaching yourself that you actually can do more than what you think you're capable of. And again, all of those things are scalable. You can start small, building up with time as you go. And as you begin to learn that you're capable of more, then you can start extending that period of time. And in the big picture of all this, you can really set those standards for the long run, right? For a 9-month goal or a 2-year goal. Like for my marathon training, it was a 9-month building block for me, but I broke it up into 3 months, 3 months, 3 months. So 3 months were speed, 3 months was marathon building, and then the last 3 months was really focused on race simulation and getting that last piece done. Instead of looking at it like, oh my gosh, I have to focus 150 days or 180 days, however many days it was, to get to this goal. Let me break it up into smaller pieces that are more attainable. And then within that big scope, each day, you can break things up into smaller pieces. So instead of looking at the 9 months, let me look at 1 month, let me look at the 1 week, let me look at 1 day, let me look at the activities within that 1 day that are going to allow me, and then within that one activity, let me break things up even more, right? So breaking things up, scaling it all to a big picture, and then being consistent with it, that's how you truly are able to win that negotiation with your mind and ultimately be the winner in your own mind games. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of The Painful Purpose. If you guys did happen to find a little bit of value today from this episode, it would mean the world to us if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts to leave us a rating. It takes just 2-3 seconds to do. If you happen to be watching on YouTube, if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel, that way you never miss any episodes. We're also on Instagram and TikTok. We have short form content on there if that's something that you're more into. We're also open to feedback and answering questions. If you guys ever want to reach out to us on those platforms, that's a great way to do so. If there's a certain component from this episode that reminded you of somebody that you know, maybe it's a friend or a family member, sharing these episodes with them is also a great way to spread the awareness. Our ultimate mission, again, is to try to build as much awareness within people and help people realize that you're always capable of more than what you think you are. And it's all done by breaking it up into small pieces, right? That's the whole basis of this episode, is through mind games. And if we're able to take big pictures and take big tasks and break them into smaller pieces, we can truly break through new barriers and understand that we're capable of way more than what we think we're capable of with that own self-imposed limitation. One final time, thank you again for tuning in to another episode of The Painful Purpose. Until our next episode, stick to the plan, and we'll see you soon.